This stream is about to start. We'll talk about code or whatever we'll talk about today. It's about to start, so please hang tight while I check that everything is okay. Sound check, camera check, lights check. How's my hair? Oh, wait, I don't have any hair. Maybe put some pants on and I am good to go. So get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Hi, my name is Leonard Facchinetti, and let's write some code together, shall we? What we have on the menu today is kind of surprising. It's not something that one would think is possible to begin with, which is exciting, right? So what we're going to try to do today is to allow for JSFX to communicate with OBS. Let's recap. We are working on a series of audio effects for REAPER using the JSFX language. We are doing a library as well as these effects. The library has the intent of allowing you to develop other audio effects. And we are in the middle of developing an effect called an auto mixer that helps you mix multiple microphones that may be open in a room in some kind of interview or roundtable kind of setting. And one special thing about this auto mixer is that it's able to auto mix video as well. So suppose that you have a roundtable interview, and not roundtable interview, a roundtable conversation, one microphone per person and one camera per person. Then the auto mixer is able to switch to the camera of the person who is speaking. So it's editing the video for you, sort of. And what we did yesterday is already kind of surprising. We did this. See, when I'm not speaking, it's green. That is the second person on the round table or interview. I'm kind of a lonely streamer here, so my second person is just a sine wave. But anyway, the sine wave is green and I am red. So when I start speaking, it switches to my camera. Now, of course, REAPER cannot consume video in real time. It can consume audio in real time. The processing in the auto mixer here is happening in real time, but it does not process video in real time. What does process video in real time is OBS. In fact, that's the streaming software I'm using right now to stream this to YouTube. So the plan is that we are going to use our JSFX, our real-time audio effect in REAPER, to control OBS. Well, I am a sine wave, more like a square wave. Thanks for joining me, M9. That's the kind of humor that I appreciate. So, yeah, you may be thinking, well, if REAPER does not process video in real time, then what is up with this? It seems to be doing video stuff in real time, but that's pre-recorded footage, right? It is not able to consume a camera feed in real time. And the pre-recorded footage in this case is just two items that we put here yesterday. So if you want a high-level explanation of everything that's going on, I suggest that you watch yesterday's stream because I explained everything in more detail there. But today we are going to try and dive straight in. So what's the plan? If you just look at it at face value, JSFX are not able to communicate with the external world because JSFX is a very limited language, and that's by design, so that REAPER can guarantee that it will run your JSFX fast and that it will not crash REAPER, that sort of thing. It runs in this kind of sandbox, and there is only so much it can do. There is one escape hatch. which is the escape hatch we used yesterday to communicate with the video processor. So if you're not doing live video, if you are in post-production, you recorded the interview and you are editing the interview, then you can use the video processors in REAPER. So you can do video editing in REAPER. And we used this escape hatch to communicate from the auto mixer that is processing the audio to the video processor that is selecting the camera. And that's the code that is actually rendering that green and red screen that we were looking at a moment ago. This one, though I don't want to have it on the screen for too long because it's kind of annoying. So you can use this escape hatch to communicate with the outside world. And the escape hatch is JSFX can write data to a global namespace. This global namespace is visible by the JSFX that can read and write from this global chunk of memory. And this same global chunk of memory can be accessed by video processors and ReaperScripts. And the ReaperScripts are the way we are going to control OBS. So the architecture looks like this. There is the little video processor here on the side that is doing the actual, did I say video? There is the little auto mixer that is the audio processor that is actually doing the mixing of the audio signals. And it will also determine what's the camera that should be on the screen. So all of this work is done by the audio portion of the auto mixer. Then it needs to communicate that decision with the outside world, so it writes to this global chunk of memory. I'm drawing a diagram here with my hand. So this is the auto mixer for audio. This is the global namespace. Then the global namespace is currently being read by a video processor that runs separate from the audio effect. But this global namespace can also be read by a REAPER script. And the REAPER script can be running on the background forever. So this REAPER script, written in Lua, has been a while since we wrote some Lua in my streams. So this REAPER script can read from the global namespace and it can communicate with OBS. Now this communication between a REAPER script and OBS is a bit tricky as well. OBS can be remote controlled using something called OBS WebSockets. So that's just a WebSockets interface, and if you don't know what WebSockets is, it's just a way of communicating with OBS. On a high level, that's what it is. But if you do know what WebSockets are, then you know that this is the technology employed in this communication. So OBS can be remote controlled via WebSockets. But within a ReaScript, as far as I can tell, there is no way for you to open a WebSocket. There is no WebSocket library that runs in REAPER and that is accessible via the Lua interface. I'm pretty sure that one does not exist. And maybe if you're watching this and you are way into the Lua game in REAPER, you may be thinking, what about Lua sockets? As far as I know, Lua sockets don't implement WebSockets. They implement HTTP, SMTP, and so forth, but no WebSockets. And that's what we need to communicate with OBS. So we have this beautiful journey to follow along from the audio into the global namespace, into a REAPER script, and then we are missing the bridge between the ReaScript and OBS. For that, I sort of have a solution. Way back, about 2 years ago, I wrote this script that controls OBS from REAPER for other purposes. The intent was that you would hit record in REAPER and it would start the recording in OBS. You would hit stop in REAPER, it would stop a recording in OBS, so that you can sort of record video in REAPER. Of course, you were recording video in OBS, but it was remote controlled by REAPER and everything would be kept in sync. Kind of handy. So for that to work, it was a ReaScript that communicated with OBS. And the way it did that was the ReaScript called the program on the command line. Because ReaScripts cannot open WebSockets as far as I know. but they can call programs on the command line. And then I wrote a command line program that would connect to OBS via WebSockets and send the messages necessary to control OBS. So that's the full story. Audio processor in JSFX communicates to global namespace. From the global namespace, we get that information in a ReaScript. From ReaScript, we go to the command line and invoke a program that I have written. And then that program will talk to OBS via WebSockets. So if we do all this right, we'll be able to run the AutoMixer live as it is running right now, the audio portion of the AutoMixer that is running live right here. And we'll be able to let that switch scenes in OBS. That's the story, that's the intent. Like ReaScripts, yes. Well, you might have to use temporary Reaper's OSC. I know what OSC, I know what that is. I know what Reaper is, and I know what temporary is. But I'm not sure I know what you're talking about. I don't know what these three words mean put together. Is there some sort of OSC support in Reaper that is temporary? I don't know. Can you explain more? Right, so today we are not writing JSFX, we are not writing a video processor, we are writing Lua. And we want to, first of all, read from this global namespace using Lua, which is not something I have done in the past, actually. Let me go to my Reaper repository and start a script that I will call liafac automixer obs.lua. And then I will register this in Reaper. And I guess I can stop because the video processor is only really running when the playhead is moving. So to demonstrate the AutoMixer for post-production, I would have to have the playback going. But in our case, ReaScripts don't need to have the playhead moving in order to be running. So we can stop it. And now let's go to the Actions menu. New action, load ReaScript. And then, interesting. I don't know what that is anymore. Code, and then Reaper scripts AutoMixer OBS. Okay, it is there, and if I run, nothing happens because the script is currently empty. Let's do a simple hello world. It is show console message. And I think that's the only argument that I need to pass. And if I run it now, it shows hello world. So as soon as I save, the script will be refreshed here in Reaper. When I run, it will run the latest version. Now we need to know how to get stuff from the global memory. So we should go to help and ReaScript documentation and look for gmem. And one thing to know about this documentation is, first, everything is in here. It's a kitchen sink. It's a lot of things. And also the documentation works for any programming language you can use for writing Reaper scripts. So C++, EEL2, Lua, and Python. We are going to go with Lua because that's the most popular and it is the easiest to work with. But it's important to know because, for instance, this part is documenting the functions that are available in EEL2, I think. Oh no, it's not. It's also the Lua portion. Interesting. Okay, so first I think that we need to attach to some memory namespace. Yeah, this is something that we do in the JSFX portion as well. Let me show you real quick. So in the JSFX, we say that we want to use this name. That's the name of the global namespace we have access to. Then in the video processor that you saw, the red and green alternating flashing light, that declared the same namespace. Note that this is the same name. And then on the ReaScript world, we need to use this function. So there are three worlds that can communicate: JSFX, video processor, and ReaScripts, and they use the same name so that they are talking about the same namespace. But the way you set this name is different in the three languages. But it is crucial that this name is the same. So next we can read from an index. We could write, but in our case we don't want to. And that's all there is to it, actually. So instead of showing this, let's show this index. And this means that we need to know which group you want to use to control OBS. So coming back to the auto mixer, we do have this notion of groups, and perhaps the best way to show this is with this interface. So the notion here is that there is like these 5 microphones in a room that you would like to auto mix, and then there are these 3 other microphones in another room, maybe connected via Skype, and you would like to auto mix these 2 groups separately. That's what the group is. And each group will have its own camera angle. And if you wanted, for completeness here, if you wanted to have the auto mixer for audio working in separate groups, but then the auto mixer for video mixing everyone together, I guess you would need to run a dummy auto mixer instance like maybe group 3 that doesn't, you just discard its audio, you just take the video portion of it. But the long and short of it is you can only know what is the winning track, the person who is speaking, for that group. I think that that's what makes more sense. So for the time being, let's just look at group 1, which is the default. So that's the group that is currently running. And what I expect to see is a console message that reads either 0 or 1. Because if I am speaking, then I should be the winner and it should read 0. My track is track 0 internally. Externally, it's track 1. And the tone generator is track 2, so if I'm not speaking, I expect this to see the number 1. Let's see. I was not speaking, so the number 1 showed up, and now I am speaking and I see the number 0. So it seems like the ReaScript is able to see the global namespace and get the number from there. That's good. That's the first step. Okay, OSC is built into REAPER. That much I know. OSC, as far as I know, is like, I guess, the spiritual successor of MIDI. It's another way of controlling stuff. It is less popular than MIDI for most applications, I think, but it's more powerful, and it was created later. It's more modern. And you can use it to test. So what could I test? This communication between REAPER and OBS? Is there a way for me to talk to OBS using OSC? Is that what you mean? Because I don't know of any OSC control in OBS. And ReaScript has TCP. fair enough. So WebSockets are built on top of TCP, I think. It stands to reason. It would not be a UDP kind of thing. So yeah, probably WebSockets are built on top of TCP, but then I would need to talk a very low level kind of protocol from REAPER. And oh, interesting. I didn't even know that was a thing. But I guess I would need to build my own WebSockets implementation on top of this facility, which I don't think it's a good thing to do. I think it's simpler to just go to the command line, and then on the command line, we wrote this little program that talks to OBS via WebSockets. I really wish that OBS would be controllable by the command line. That would help, but that's not the case. So anyway, we wrote this command line utility that talks to OBS, and we wrote it in Node.js. So it was very easy to talk WebSockets. In fact, there is a OBS WebSockets.js library, so I didn't even have to figure out the protocol. I just called the library. It was really easy. And just for good measure, yeah, I searched for web in the hope that I would find something about WebSockets in the native REAPER API, because I didn't check that. I didn't even bother. I just expected that the ReaScripts API would not have this kind of feature. Yeah, but it's good to know that TCP is a thing. I don't think it's too useful. I tend to just go to the command line. For instance, if I need to do a regular HTTP request, I guess I could use Lua sockets, because that's a thing. Maverick created a Lua sockets build. He was able to build Lua sockets. But truth be told, when I need to do an HTTP request, I just go to the command line and use curl, because curl is available on macOS and Windows and most Linux distributions. So I find that that's preferable. It's just simpler that way. At least I find it simpler. Right, so this is part one. We are able to read from the global memory, and we know which scene is supposed to be showing. But that's a thing that you run once and it stops, and then what would you do? Run it again? So you would need to have someone with REAPER open and just keep clicking in this button. So suppose that instead of having the console, it would actually be controlling OBS, but you would need to have a person clicking there for OBS to update things. And that's no way to live your life. So the next thing we need to do is to let this script run on the background. And that's, I think, not something we have done in the stream before. I don't think we covered this. So it's going to be a new concept as well. And Fotis is here. Hello. It's great to have you here. How is your HISE adventures going? Okay, returning here to the REAPER scripts documentation, there is this thing called defer. And it goes by different names, I think. Yes, it can either be called defer or run loop. Let's open the docs for both defer and run loop, just in case that something is different in the two of them. So again, when I'm navigating this, I am looking at what language this applies to. So in this case, it's for EEL2, so I'm going to skip that. And this is for Lua, so I'm going to go there. And I will also go to defer. I think that they're going to say the same thing. Yes. So what this is going to do is add code to be called back by REAPER. Oh no, I lost it. No, where is it? Here it is again. So we have an option. Do we like the name defer or do we like the name run loop? In this case, I think it makes more sense to call it run loop, but let's read the paragraph. Adds code to be called back by REAPER used to create persistent ReaScripts that continue to run and respond to input while the user does other tasks, identical to run loop. Note that no undo point will be automatically created when the script finishes unless you create it explicitly. So when you're writing REAPER scripts, you have to keep in mind the operations you're performing and you have to control the undo points so that you are able to run your script and then hit Command Z and undo the things that your script did. And in many cases, REAPER is able to pick things up automatically. Sometimes you have to write a little bit of code to help REAPER out. But in our case, I don't think that we need undo points at all, because the purpose of this is that it's going to be running on the background, doing this bridge between JSFX and OBS. So there is nothing to undo, which is good. Dealing with undo can be tricky sometimes. But now let's get into this adds code to be called back by REAPER. Let's explore how this actually works. And I think I'm going to use the run loop variant. So I say run loop, and then I have to give it a function. And hang on, this was showing me two. Oh no, it's just one argument. It's function. Okay, so I have to give it a function. So the point is that I write a function and I could give this function a name and pull it outside, but I think it's more convenient to just have it here. Oh no, hang on. We will need to call this function recursively. We'll get there when we get there. So if you say run loop, or I guess let's start with defer. It's the same thing, but for the sake of explanation, it's easier if I do it this way. And also to make things a little prettier, I will put a new line at the end of the print. So there. So what's going to happen now is REAPER is going to run this line by line, as typical programs do in typical programming languages like Lua. So REAPER is going to run this line and attach the displays in memory. Then it's going to run this line, and something interesting is going to happen. It is going to register this function to be called, but it will not call the function right away, which means that it will run this line first, which means that we'll see our 0 or 1, and then the script is going to end, and REAPER will see, do I have something that has been deferred? If so, and in this case, yes, then run the thing that was deferred. And I'm doing this in this order to show that this line that appears later in the code actually gets executed first, as will be proved by the fact that we'll see a number and then hello, and not the other way around. So this concept is crucial. We are deferring the execution of this function to the end of this script. That's what the documentation says. Adds code to be called back by adds code to be called back by REAPER. It will be called when the main script ends. So we see a number and we see hello. And this happens every time. I can run this over and over and we always see a number and then hello, never the other way around. So it's not like this is running in parallel and there is some sort of race condition, if you know what those are. But so far, we just have a script that defers and then terminates. So we run this line, then we run this much, then we run that line, and then we run whatever was in here. And that's the end of the story. But that's not what we want to do. What we want is to have a program running on the background. We want our script to continue running, to continue reading the global namespace. And if something changes, to send a message to OBS. So what we have to do is we do some work In this case, we say hello. And then we need to defer. So I guess at this point, we should change to the run loop variation. And I will call this function loop. So far, what I did was just to give this function a name. I did not change the meaning of the program. I guess I gave this function a name, and I also changed from defer into run loop. But the point of the program is still the same. It does exactly the same as before. It runs this line, it creates a function, does not run the function yet. Register the function to run later, but does not run the function yet. Then it runs this line, gets to the end of the script, then the deferred function will be called, and we run this line. So let's prove that this is actually the case by running the script again. Same story. Great. Next, we do the thing I mentioned, where at the end of our loop, so we do some work, and at the end of that, we call ourselves again, or rather, we register ourselves to be called again. So despite the name run loop, Reaper will not run this function in a loop automatically. We have to do it ourselves. We have to remember to register ourselves to run again. If we don't register ourselves, like we just saw, the script will terminate. And that may be what you want in some cases. You may be doing some background work, and when the work is finished, you terminate. So you don't call run loop again. But in our case, I think that we just want to keep running. We will keep running until you tell me otherwise. And this is going to be something that is going to print hello infinitely many times, which may crash Reaper and may crash the stream. So let's see what happens. And if everything crashes, then it was nice to see you. And I see you again in the near future when my computer is back to a working stage. Nope, yeah, okay. Nothing crashed, but we do get an infinite stream of hellos. Our program is just running on the background, calling itself again over and over. And if we try to run it again, then Reaper is going to tell us, yeah, this program is already running. Do you want to run a new instance and get 2 infinite series of hellos? Do you want to cancel this execution? So pretend that you never clicked on this button, or do you want to terminate that instance that is just printing hello? And you can then tell Reaper to terminate the instance, and then the infinite series of hellos stopped. And this is how you develop a Reaper script that runs on the background. You have to register yourself to run again and register yourself to run again infinitely many times. Let's hear what you have to say. Oh, you are brainstorming about HISE. And Juan is here. Hello. How is it going with the volume plugin? Did you try it out? And Tail is here. Hello, Tail. So I asked you yesterday, Tail, if you had experience working with a video processor. Now I'm going to ask you, do you have experience working with ReaScripts? Is this something that you are into? I don't think we talked about this yet. So do you like writing Lua, and do you write ReaScripts? If so, for what? What do you do with ReaScripts? Let me know. Oh, and Juan is liking the little plugin we developed. Great. So now we know how to read from the global namespace. We know how to print a message, which is not too useful, but we know how to do that in a loop. I guess perhaps the next part would be to not have this number 1 hard-coded. And there are fancy ways of doing this, but I think we will go with the simple way, which is to just prompt the user to say the group that they want to control in the beginning of the script. Now I can think of two ways of doing this. Actually, I can think of like several ways of doing this. One is to just prompt the user when the plugin loads. I have an example of this. My prepare project for video editing script is an example where we just prompt the user to input some data when the script starts. We could follow something like this approach. Which may be better because it is super flexible and relatively easy to use, but it could also be a bit annoying because it will prompt the user to select a group every time, and in most cases it would be group 0, or I guess group 1. And this is something that it perhaps would have to do every day when you start streaming, if you stream every day like I try to. So I don't know, I guess I am going to ask for the... Or maybe, here is an idea. I could have something like group equals new. I could have a comment like, that's not how you do comments in Lua. It's with 2 dashes. This is how you do comments in many other languages, but not Lua. So change this to the group number if you don't want to be prompt about it. Good enough. And then we use this group, and I guess let's drop that there. So now what we are printing over and over is the group. Okay. Or not the group. We are printing the scene that should be showing in OBS. Oh, now it has just occurred to me. We need a way of mapping the AutoMixer instances into scenes in OBS, which is not trivial to do with a prompt like the one I showed. It's not trivial to have a prompt like this that will help you map AutoMixer instances to OBS scenes. I can either have that mapping here in the configuration, here in the source of the script, there's sort of configuration, or I could have that in the AutoMixer instances themselves. It really boils down to how we want to set this. If we want to set this by index, so for instance, this is my OBS that is currently streaming. And I could either go with something like I want to switch to the 10th scene, or I could go by name, which I think is more helpful because it would be annoying to have to count. And if you reorder things, then your mappings are messed up. So I think that what we'll do is impossible to do with simply, for instance, what we do here for the video track. When you're doing the video processor, you can set the video track by number, by index, because that's the only thing you can do. You cannot, in the video processor, you cannot refer to the inputs by name, but in OBS you can. So this kind of mapping is insufficient or undesirable. And what we can do is better. We can have a mapping here. So I guess, and this mapping is not trivial to do with just prompts, the Lua prompts. And we could, at this point, pull off the bigger guns and do a full user interface using something like IMGUI. That's possible, but I will keep it simple and have you edit the source of the plugin to configure it. So now I will not do any prompts, and instead I will have a preamble that you need to configure. And this would be the separator for like the end of the configuration, so to speak. And I guess I will put 79. I will put 79 dashes there. And to test, it will be nice if there are actual names and groups here. So I'll have a group there. And what we want to map is from the video track to OBS scene. That will be a mapping that is going to be a table between something like 1, which is video track 1, maps to something like, for instance, guest 1. Or I guess speaker 1. Something like that. Let's have 4 of them. Well, actually, in our example, we only have 2, so let's do that. And this is not the syntax that you use to write tables in Lua. What is the syntax that we use? Is it this syntax? It seems to be. But really, do I need this? I guess I need because it's not a string. Yes. For a moment, I was not remembering the Lua syntax, but I think that this is the Lua syntax. So now, what we do is simply read that group from the global namespace and then map to the OBS scene. So now what I expect to see in the console is speaker 1, speaker 2, and so on, which would be the names of the scenes in OBS. And oops, attempted to concatenate a new value. Okay, I think I know what's going on. This group is 0 indexed, while this is 1 indexed. So I'll have to have this. Okay, so speaker 2 is the sine wave and speaker 1 is me. It's working. It's still not communicating with OBS, but we have gone a long ways. Let's see what you have to say. Run loop is calling itself at the end to run again. Yeah, so run loop is just another name for defer. And you know what? I'm gonna revert back to defer. It doesn't matter. Both names mean the same thing. It's exactly the same functionality under different names. But run loop kind of has this implication that it will be run in a loop. And that's not the case. Reaper will not take the function that you pass to run loop and run that in a loop. No, it will only run it once. And I guess defer kind of communicates this intent a little more clearly. So the way this works is the first time the script runs, we get to this line and Reaper will register this function to run when the script is over. The script ends right away. Then the function is run. But the last thing we do in the function is to register the function again to be called when the script is over. So the script is over, the function is called again in a loop. I hope that that helps you. It's a bit of a tricky concept, really, but I hope that that helps you make sense of this. Yeah, run loop is this function is sort of calling itself. It's registering itself to be called when the script is over. Oh, and here's another thing that may confuse people. What is the point of having defer at all? Why not just write the code like this, which is an infinite loop? The function will be called over and over. That much will work. The problem is that Reaper is not interactive while your script is running. So, or rather I should say, Reaper is not interactive while your script is at work. So if your program is calling functions, it's doing stuff, the Reaper window will freeze. I will not actually show you this because it may break the rest of the stream. Who knows? It may crash Reaper or something. I don't know. But while Reaper is running your script, you cannot click on anything. Nothing is interactive. So you want to call defer, because Reaper will defer this function call. So it will register, okay, I need to run this function later, but hey, let me process these clicks from the user. Let me process this image that I need to render, this waveform that I need to show. Let me do my own thing. Let me process some audio. Let me do other things. When I have some spare time, I will go and run that function for you. Great. So the point of running a function with defer is to give Reaper the chance to do other work before you do your work again. And Reaper has its own scheduler to make sure that everything has a chance of running, but nothing is going to overtake your machine. I hope that helps. Okay, you haven't done any Reaper scripting. Nice, so I hope you enjoy this. Oh, and Bo is here, hello. And Mage is here, hello. We have everyone here. And Juan is going back to work. See you later. Okay, that makes sense. Awesome. So the bulk of the work here is done, really. But there is one more thing that I want to do, and that is to detect when I need to send a message to OBS. Because I don't want, every time that this runs, I don't want for every run of this loop to send a message to OBS saying, hey, change to scene 1, change to scene 1, change to scene 1. It's the same scene. There is no point in keep updating it. So we will have a notion of scene. And we will have a notion of previous scene. We will have a notion of scene and previous scene, and we will only message OBS when the scene is not equal to the previous scene. That's the intent that we are going for. But I just realized that I'm being a bad Lua citizen here, so I will backtrack to the commit we just made, this one, this stage of the code, and I will actually use some locals here. Not that it matters a whole lot, but it is better form to use local. And there is one thing I don't remember. I don't remember if a function will be available within itself if it is local. So the point is that if you don't say local, the variable is global. So if I had a variable called group here, it would overwrite this one. But if I have local here, then it's local to this function and it does not overwrite that one, which in general is better form, because then you can make sense of the whole functionality of a piece of code, like a function, just by looking at that piece of code instead of having to reason about the whole program every time. So local is always better than global. And I suppose that local is not the default because it can be confusing for beginners, maybe. Anyway, local is better form, but I'm not sure that this loop will be available in here. So I'm not sure I can use local in this context. Let's try. Oh, it's still running. It seems to work. And with that, let's have local scene and local previous scene, both of which I'm going to explicitly initialize to new. This is just so, yeah. I was thinking of what do we do when we first load? Do we send a message to OBS to switch to a scene or don't? I think we do. So that's what we are going to do. And that's why I put this news here, as we are about to see. So the scene is this. And well, I guess I will show it on the console. And we will have to update the previous scene into scene, just like this. So we update the scene and we show the scene, but we only do that if the scene is not equal to the previous scene. If the scene is not equal to the previous scene, it means that we switched. So we show what scene we switched to. Then we update the previous scene. And note how I put these variables here, not there, because I want these variables to persist across calls of the loop function. But because I have local here, I'm sort of communicating this intent that I want these variables to exist only within the scope of where it is defined, which happens to be the global namespace. But there are nuances to this. Go read the Programming in Lua book if you're interested in the nitty-gritty. Anyway, so right now the script keeps printing speaker 1, speaker 1, speaker 1, speaker 1, speaker 2 in a row. Now it should only print when it changes, and it should also print when it starts. So I'm going to clear the console. I'm going to be quiet so that the scene switches are clear. And now when I start speaking, it switches to scene 1, and it is a bit chaotic because we still have to work out the smoothing. But it seems to be working relatively well. Yes, it seems to be doing what I said it should. It's only printing when it's switching scenes. It's never the case that we see 2 1s in a row or 2 2s in a row. And that's pretty much it. I think we nailed this. Now, of course, we don't want to be printing to the console. What we do want to do is to send a message to OBS. So there is this other script that I mentioned, is this script that records video in REAPER. And it does so by calling OBS CLI, which is this program I wrote. And it calls that program, and that program communicates with OBS using WebSockets. So we need to do a command line call. And we could work this in right now, but I won't. First, because my time is about to end, but also because OBS 28 is about to come out. And OBS 28 changes everything when it comes to the OBS WebSockets thingy. First, OBS 28 incorporates OBS WebSockets. It used to be a plugin, like in OBS 27, like the one I am running. You have to install OBS WebSockets separately. It is a plugin. But in OBS 28, it is native. It comes with OBS. But what's more to the point, it introduces a new version of the protocol. OBS 28 comes with OBS WebSockets 5, a different version of the protocol that is incompatible with version 4 that exists in the plugin that I have installed here in my OBS 27. It is incompatible, so we will need to rework OBS CLI, the command line tool that I developed, to work with the new protocol. We could work in the old protocol But what's the point, right? It's about to become obsolete, and OBS 28 is coming out anytime now. It's already in release candidate 1. So there isn't really a point in developing a whole thing around OBS 27 coming with OBS WebSockets version 4. Instead, we should look at version 5. So at this point, we have all the infrastructure we need, and we know how to call a program on the command line. We have done that in the past. Even on the stream, it was a different program, but we did this about 1 year ago. The first series of streams actually was about this. Anyway, so we know how to call a program on the command line. We just need to rework our command line program to work with the new version of the protocol. And then we can use that command line program in our little script that we started writing today. So I think that we sort of proved the concept. It is possible to read from the global memory. It's possible to keep a script running on the background. It is possible for us to send messages only when a scene changes. I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty sure this is going to work out. So the schedule is this. We are going to take a day off tomorrow. On Friday, I will be over IDGQD Sound Areas channel, and we'll be talking about mastering with Darren. It's a follow-up to a previous stream from 2 weeks ago. Then next week, we can pick this up. And I guess we can either go to this OBS CLI thing and start reworking that around protocol of OBS WebSockets 5. Or, so we have, I guess, 3 options. We can either start working on OBS CLI and add support for OBS WebSockets 5 and do a bunch of other things that need to be done in that project. Or we can stop here and work on the smoothing of the scene switches, because right now it flickers a lot when I'm speaking because the 2 people are competing and it changes scenes too fast. So we need to smooth this out and change scenes less fast, I guess, more slowly. But there is also a third option that has nothing to do with any of this. I'm also into electronics, if you don't know. I am starting to learn about electronics. I don't know much about it. So what I did is I bought a kit and I thought we could build it together. It's a VU meter. It's very simple, but I thought we could take a break from coding and actually do some soldering, which can be fun. And it's a simple VU meter, but still it has some transistors and resistors. It's not just an Arduino kind of thing. It's real electronics. So I thought we could do a soldering stream for a change, starting Monday. So that's the schedule. Today, I'm not streaming. Friday, IDGQD Sound. And then on Monday, perhaps we can pick this up and it could be fun. I just noticed that it was just glare from the the lights. But yeah, Pocket VU meter, it says, surprise your friends in the disco. It was $10 just for soldering practice, because I don't know how to solder all that well. And we could look at the schematic and learn about how this works. It could be fun. Anyway, if you are into this, then let me know. Otherwise, if you prefer the coding streams, then let me know too, because it's good to know what you all are interested in. All right. Let me make sure that I address all your comments before we wrap up. So you can do the previous scene equals scene in if statement instead of every loop. Hang on. You can do the previous scene equals scene in the if statement instead of every loop. I'm not sure I understand. Oh, okay, I see. Okay, you're saying that I only need to update this line if something has changed. You are right. It doesn't matter, right? Because we know that the previous scene is equal to the scene, so this doesn't do anything. I think it's better form to have it like this. I think it reads better this way. It's personal preference. There is no really argument to be made here, I don't think. Yes, it's a bit of an extra operation, but it's so fast that it doesn't matter. And I think that the code reads nicer, so Do you have a strong argument for me to put this in the if loop, in the if block? If so, then let me know. But anyway, yeah, I see you all on Friday. I hope you have a good Thursday. And thanks for supporting the channel, for being here. Thank you to Bo and 9, Fortis, Mage, Juan, Tail, and everyone else who is watching but not being active here on the chat. All right. See you. Bye. Thank you for watching the stream. You know how great it has been. Or maybe it sucked, and I am glad that you stuck with me. And soon we'll all be back together for some more coding or talking or chilling. The next time I'll be streaming.